Students come from diverse backgrounds and situations and have diverse experiences. How do you know if they're thriving, doing fine, or perhaps struggling? This is Mickey Marinelli, and here are a few tips for checking in on students to see how they're doing.
What if some students haven't been coming to class? They're physically absent and nobody noticed. What if they're mentally disengaged? They're not participating. Or they're having difficulty keeping up with class material. Or perhaps they're struggling or even needing help. Just checking in frequently can be a lot of help. Now, ideally, we'd like to have time to spend with all of our students, just checking with them personally, but that's often not possible, especially with large classes that have hundreds of students, or if you meet with them only a few hours per week. So here are a few ideas on how to check in on students using Canvas. But the ideas are applicable to any other learning management system like D2L, Brightspace, Blackboard, Moodle, or other. So the first is to check if the students are physically absent or if they disappeared and nobody noticed. Perhaps you don't take attendance, or you don't have mandatory attendance, or you only have it for a portion of your classes, or you meet quite infrequently and you don't know if the student has disappeared for some time. So what you can do for this is to create a course that requires frequent logins into the learning management system, in this case Canvas. And then all you do is that you check if the students are logging in. Since you require frequent logins, you can check if they're not logging in or if they are. This is very simple. It just gives you a glimpse on whether or not students are there. Now, students might be there, but they might be mentally disengaged. So one strategy to check that is to give frequent quizzes, simple quizzes, low-stake quizzes, 0-point quizzes, simply to check if the students are submitting and if they're engaged in class. This gives you a slightly deeper look at the situation, and it also has the advantage that in the quizzes you can ask them classwork material to see if they're having difficulty keeping up or not. Now, of course, in both of these settings, you would follow up by contacting the students, especially if you have any concerns. This way, you can see if they're struggling or needing help. But you can do much more. You can ask the students directly how they're doing by giving frequent quizzes. Now, I call them quizzes, but they're really surveys. Asking them, how are you doing? And of course, there too, following up by contacting them if you have any concerns. So ultimately, all of these little things should help you check in on students to see if they're doing all right. And by following up later with a message, you can show a little bit of care.
I recommend using all of these approaches throughout your course consistently, and I'll take you step by step on what they're about and how to do them using Canvas. But if you're interested in one in particular, you can jump directly to that section. That's the slide number they occur on and the approximate time of the video. So you can move forward to the video to the section that interests you.
So let's begin. The first one is to require frequent logins and to check if students are logging in. So you open your learning management system, this is Canvas, and you go to your course. And once you're in your course, you click on People. And when you do that, the people in your course will show up. Here you have all your students lined up alphabetically and your TAs and the time at which they last logged on. And this is virtually impossible to grasp and understand who's logging on when and how long ago it was, whether they're students or TAs. So I recommend to go up here on these three little dots You click on them and it opens another panel, and you select Student Interaction Report so that you open that panel there. When you open Student Interaction Report, you'll have a list of all your students listed alphabetically and the last time at which they interacted with their course. You also have their score and this icon here that allows you to email each student separately. So what you want to do now is sort them by when they last interacted with the course by clicking on this button here, and it sorts them by interaction, last time they interacted. So here you have the students now sorted by interaction time, and you see immediately that this student is of concern because they never interacted with the course. These two also, because they interacted really rarely, and this one over here might be of concern too. So now you can email these students directly by clicking on the email button, which will open the email and write directly to that student. When you click on it, the following email screen will show up. So it opens up in the email panel and it goes to student number 12 because that's the student you clicked on. And then you can write to that student directly, whatever you think is appropriate. For example, dear student, I notice you have not been logging onto Canvas lately, so I'm just touching base to see how things are going, and so forth. So the second one is to give frequent quizzes and to check if students are submitting and if they're having a difficult time keeping up. For this, you create a quiz on quizzes, and you create whatever quiz you think is appropriate. And then once you've created it, you can check if students have submitted and what they submitted using SpeedGrader and other ways that we'll see later. So the first one is using SpeedGrader. When you open SpeedGrader, you see immediately that this student has not submitted an assignment. So what you can do is write directly to that student in this assignment comments section, whatever you think is appropriate. Like, hello, I'm just checking in, and so forth. Now, the student didn't submit an assignment, so it's actually quite unlikely that they will be checking the comments on their assignment that they didn't submit. So you might want to contact them by email directly, and I'll show you how in a few moments. For that, you want to go to your gradebook over here, and once you open the gradebook, you'll see all the students who submitted and those who still have to submit. You get in the gradebook the list of all your students and all the assignments that you have given with their scores, whether they have a score or didn't submit. In this case, we're looking at quiz for week 3, and you want to email the students who did not submit. So to find them, you're going to click on the 3 little buttons at the right side of the quiz and select Message Students Who to select the students you want to email. When you do that, it opens a message button. Here's the message button, and in this case, you want to message those students who haven't submitted yet. So when you click on that, it selects automatically all those students who haven't submitted yet. Here they are. The list of students will show up here, and you will get an automatic subject line, which is no submission for, and then whatever name of the quiz you have. And here you can write in the message whatever you think is appropriate, like I noticed you did not submit the response to the quiz, so I'm wondering if everything is all right, and so forth. Now the last one is to give frequent quizzes to ask how students are doing directly. For this, I recommend creating an assignment section called check-ins, so you can have them all together. So here they are, check-ins, so you have them all together. You're going to set up your quiz or survey. I personally write that I know it's quirky to do this survey, but sometimes it's easier to write something than to tell me, so that's why I'm doing it. And for this, you want a graded quiz or survey. It has to be graded, even though you're going to give 0 points, of course, just so it shows up under grades. And then you can message students directly by looking at your gradebook. Now, in this type of survey, there are no right or wrong answers. If a student's saying that they're fine or they're struggling, it's okay. So you don't want them to get a message after they submitted their quiz that they answered a question wrong. So for that, you're going to go on to edit. And once you're on edit, you have 2 ways to go about it. So the first way is to not allow students to see their quiz responses. So you don't click on that. The second way is that you can select that or not, as we just saw. And once you select it, though, you make sure that you do not select this other option to let students see their correct answers. This way, the student doesn't know if they answered correctly or not, and that's you're not going to grade them on an incorrect answer for this type of quiz. Here's an example question that you could be asking your student. Simply how they are doing in a multiple choice kind of fashion. But in fact, instead of really doing it multiple choice, I recommend using multiple answers. So you can select more than one answer being correct. And that will come in handy when you go grade and look at students and how they are doing. And I'll show you that a little bit later. So in this case, I choose, for example, the first 2 to be correct. And they're simply asking how they're doing. I also like to give students information of where they can ask for help. Here it's at the Counseling and Mental Health Center, and asking them whether they are able to ask for help if in need or not. Now, these multiple choice-like questions are ideal if you have very, very large classes. If you have smaller classes, you're better off also asking some open-ended questions. Or if you have large classes and you feel up to it for grading them. And here are some examples of open-ended questions. What can I do to help? Is there anything you would like to share with me or with anyone else that I could help you get in contact with? Would you like to add or share anything else? For these questions, you would choose the essay type questions so students can fill them in directly. When you grade these questions, you can go to SpeedGrader, as we said before, and other options that I'll show you in a second. So when you go to SpeedGrader, you can see what each student has put as their answers to this quiz. When you go to SpeedGrader, you get to student 1, for example, and the student hasn't submitted, and you can write to them directly over here in this message box, but it might be more efficient, as we said before, to write to them directly so they get a message in their inbox rather than on their assignment, which they didn't submit. And here's an example of a student who's doing just fine, and they're able to access the counseling services if needed. And this is their answer to the open-ended question, anything else you'd like to add or share? They write, I just wanted to say thank you for asking. It's reassuring to know professors care and are sensitive to everyone's different situation. So even though the student is doing fine, they're still appreciative of some care. I recommend writing a comment to the student just to thank them for filling this in and letting them know that they shouldn't hesitate to reach out if they need anything. And here's an example of a student who reports struggling. So you definitely want to follow up with the student. You can write directly some comments over here, as well as underneath the question itself over here. And of course, best of all, is to message them directly as well. The advantage of setting up quizzes is that you can look at quiz statistics. Here on the quiz statistics, you have the summary of the proportion of students that answered each question differently and how they answered them. For example, here you have 2 people who responded they're doing just fine, 45 who said they're mostly fine, 2 were having ups and downs, and 1 was struggling. You can click on the number of respondents over here, and it will tell you who those students are. For example, if we click on this one here, we'll get a pop-up button showing us who that student is. Here it is. This is student 4 who responded that they are struggling. Now, unfortunately, from this button, you can't write to them directly, but you can write their name down and contact them separately. You can also, similarly to what we did before for the regular quizzes, go to the gradebook and contact students directly from there. In this case, for the check-in in October, you want to message student who got a certain score or did not submit, for example. If you choose that you want to message students who haven't submitted yet, you click this option when the button appears, and then it will select those students. Their names will appear right here. And again, as a default, you'll have this subject line, no submission for, and this is check-in October. So you might want to rephrase that something like just checking in or whatever you prefer. And then you write the message to those students. Like, I noticed you didn't respond to the check-in quiz. Is everything all right? Please let me know, and so forth. You can also message students that fit different other criteria. For example, students who scored less than a certain amount, and you'll put in that certain amount in this little box that will appear right up there. Of course, that amount depends on how you set up the quiz. Let's imagine I choose 35%, and it will select those students who scored less than that amount. When you select that, you'll have the name of the students that fit that criterion appear over here. And again, an automatic subject line scored less than 35. That's the number that you chose for whatever test you're doing. And of course, you can change that. And then write to your students, whatever you think is appropriate. And of course, as we said, you can directly message them with the email function on Canvas to contact them directly through that system as well.
So I hope that these different methods can be used throughout your course for checking in on students. And then by following up with individual messages, you're not just checking in on them, but you're actually reaching out and making sure everything is all right.
This way, if they have been physically absent, perhaps you can bring them back in. If they have been mentally disengaged, you can re-engage them. If they have been having difficulty keeping up, you can remedy to that. If they have been struggling, you can reach out to them. And if they're needing help, you can help them out or direct them to where they can need help. Just checking in. How are you doing? Is everything all right? Do you need anything? How can I help? All these are little simple ways that can bring everyone together to a tighter knit, a better community so people can thrive and do better. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you want any more information. Thank you.